All right, we are live. Another episode of Gearbox 2.0. I don't know, this is episode 41 or so. We don't have the little intro and all that stuff when I do the live streams, but welcome whoever is coming by to check things out, join the conversation, and get into some stuff related to production, the business side of video production and filmmaking, all kinds of stuff like that. So my name is Jem Schofield. If you have not, please subscribe to the channel. There's new content here every Wednesday at 9 a.m. Pacific and also at 3 p.m. Pacific. We do two things. I do Gearbox, which is sometimes pre-recorded, sometimes live. And then every Wednesday, we have the boys, myself, Caleb Pike, and Ben Barden with Camera and Flask. What's up, Bill? Good to have you here. So it is Wednesday in the Pacific Northwest. We are in the middle of an early heat wave here. I was in town last night with a buddy of mine seeing a very close friend, Doug Rappaport. If you've ever watched my channel, I did a whole thing. Hey, Rimrock Creative Media. Andres, nice to see you guys. Hola. And we went into town to go see my good friend Doug Rappaport play with a cover band he does with some friends who are all professional musicians called the DCs. So it's a AC/DC cover band, great stuff. And then followed by Buck Cherry. So we went to that in the sweltering Hawthorne Theater, which was like going to a sauna, but worse. But that's just because I'm getting older. You know, I like living out in the country. So what are you going to do? So I am probably on about 5 hours of sleep and ready to chat with everybody about general production questions, always on Gearbox. If it's a live stream, the chat is open for generalized production-based questions. So just fire away, thinking about a camera, a light, you know, a particular audio solution. I will do what I can to answer questions. You didn't get a pre-release video about this live stream, Bill, because when I created this live stream yesterday, I made it public, and guess what? The YouTubes decided not to make it public. So when I came in this morning to set everything up, it was still tagged as private, and away we go. So I don't know what to do about that, except for the fact that I'll make sure that that doesn't happen again as best as I can. So how's everybody doing? Let me know how it's going out there. And of course, for people who are watching the rerun, the recorded version of this, welcome to Gearbox and to the C47. Travis, I'm wearing the Rode Lav mic, which is very, very small. Sometimes I use this little LMC furry on it to handle wind noise and things like that. And the thing that I like about the Rode microphone, and I'm not saying it's a COS 11 or a Countryman or, you know, so on and so forth, is that it has this thing called the Micon adapter. And what you can do is you can adapt this particular microphone very, hey Desmond, very, very easily to virtually any mic system. So I just have the standard 1/8" version here, which is going into the Wireless Go, which I've been using a lot for this type of stuff. But generally, if I'm going to use this microphone, I'm going to use it with my Sony system, the PMW system. So I have a Micon adapter that just screws onto there and then it attaches to that, but they make them for Lectrosonics, they make them for Sennheiser. So Micon adapters, Rode lavalier lapel microphone. Not too expensive and good quality. I'm not gonna say it's the top of the heap, but it's very cost effective. It's incredibly easy to hide because of the size of the microphone. And in post-production, if you feel that you need to clean anything up, then a little bit of isotope RX will do the trick and get you where you need to be. This morning, though, I haven't had a lot of coffee, so my voice might be a little deeper, and that might be helping the cause over here. So I said, for some reason, hold on, that I was going to talk about this finding time, this, I guess we say, work-life balance is what we're going to talk about. So heat in Puerto Rico, yes, but probably more humid. Cleaning some audio for a video that I recorded at the brew pub right beside a road. Dude, have you used iZotope? Because if you record audio for a video at a brew pub right beside a road, iZotope RX was basically designed for that. Now, the great thing about iZotope is that they sell a little plug-in pack that you can use with virtually any NLE. And that plug-in pack has this voice or dialogue denoise, which will clean a lot of stuff. What live stream capture box? You know, that really is a question for Caleb. He's a lot deeper into this than I am. I mean, I'm just using a Camlink 4K. I've shot a video on it, and that's just plugged in to my MacBook Pro. And then I'm using the XT3 today. Sometimes I use a C200. And we're just using Google Hangouts. It's not a perfect system by any means, but it's incredibly straightforward. And, you know, as far as a capture box, it's hard to say. There's some nice stuff from Teradek and some other companies out there. It depends if what you're trying to do is more sort of all around with your computer system, or it's very camera centric. If it's camera centric, then maybe look at the Teradek solutions. So the VidiUs and things like that. RX7, yes, hands down. However you would do that, it's amazing. So there you go. Thumbs up, hands down. So let's talk about finding time, which ironically is becoming more and more difficult for me, and it can be quite a challenge. Now, I'm going to kind of talk about this going back in time, and I want you to jump in and give me your experiences and your feedback and input as well. But for me, finding time has changed tremendously for a work-life balance over the last, let's say, 20, 25 years in terms of stuff. What's up, Bad Karma? You know, for me, when I first started out, and I think this is pretty typical of anybody who's coming into an industry that's similar to ours, which is creative. You're young, great. You have a lot of energy, great. You are hungry, great. You did spell my name correctly this time. And you are willing to sort of do anything to get into the field that you're interested in. And this, I think, applies to any field that somebody is passionate about, something that they want to do. So it doesn't necessarily have to be production or post-production or something directly related to what we do for a living. But I think it's important to understand that the passion part of it comes first, because then you're willing to put in all of that time. But there is a breaking point, and the breaking point happens at a certain point when you start to evaluate, I'm doing something, hopefully, that I like to do in my life, and that's going to fulfill me during my work hours. But then what happens, and where do I get the time to find a balance between that, which may include working with friends and doing things that I like, but also having my own time? And that could be your own time for you. It could be your own time with friends. It could be your own time with family, or it could be a combination of all of those things. And I think that, you know, as my wife and I started kind of our journey, and at a certain point, we started to look at things like starting a family, and that's not going to be relevant to everybody. You start to think about, okay, can I pull all-nighters all the time, physically and also mentally, to be able to also find that work-life balance? And I think that you are going to have to make a decision if you're younger about where you want to go with your career. And sometimes life just pivots, right? It changes. So you have situations where, for instance, you meet somebody and you didn't anticipate that, and you were going to be a career-minded person, and it was just going to be on set all of the time, and you're just going to do, you know, deadline-driven stuff all of the time. And then you meet somebody and your entire life changes. I think you have to be willing to have those experiences, and those are the things that may wind up being, usually are the things that wind up being the big fulfilling parts of your life. But I do find that I struggle constantly with this balance between the two. And at this point in time, I am in a position maybe that some people out there are and other people are not. I'm married and I have 3 children, and they also need my time. At the same time, I want to be able to do this, and I love to do this. And it's always finding that balance between the two things. I'm wondering how you guys do that on your end in terms of finding a balance. It's not an easy thing to do. I will say something just because it's coming to mind. I went on a trip about 5 or 6 years ago with my family and my extended family, and we went to Italy. And I've been to Italy a number of times, but on this particular trip, I don't know how I did it, but I wasn't doing Gearbox 5 days a week. And I made a conscious decision that I was really going to go on vacation. So there was almost no work on that trip. I mean, I took a camera out, I did a couple of little things here and there. But what it allowed me to do was to look outside of what my everyday was. And part of it was being in that environment, but part of it was making the decision that when I'm on vacation, I'm on vacation. And I think that that was a big moment for me, because what I did, and I was in Italy, so if you've ever been there, you might understand this. While working in Italy is chaos, and I've done it before, being there and looking at culturally the balance of work and sort of personal life is a pretty amazing thing to see, because you realize that at least here in this country, in the United States, we are so driven by the work world that we rarely, and this is a large percentage of people, rarely can find a proper balance between our work and our personal lives. And I think that that's compounded now with social media and all of the communication that we are just ingesting all of the time. So it's very hard for us to focus. And when I look at younger generations, some of them seem to be able to handle that better. Some of them I don't think have really sorted it out. And I feel that we're in this really strange transitional period. It wasn't the first 5 years of smartphones and smart devices. It's really now in the last 2 to 3 years where I'm seeing a lot of people struggle with the quantity of communication that we have to deal with. And I think that for me, this is a big area that I keep looking at over and over. There's times where I feel compelled. I always call this the ring of Gollum. You know, this is like the device that if you lose it, it's just, we are so connected to and driven by these devices, and we are seeing and ingesting communication so much that I find that, at least for me personally, that it is affecting the life balance. It affects my life balance with my family, because even if I take the time to be with them, and I have kids who are 18, 15, 11, they're so connected to those devices that it's much harder to have those connections with them. And so we're going on a vacation this summer for 3.5 weeks. And those are the times where we connect. It's also important, if you're a parent, I think, if you have multiple children, that you spend, and, you know, if you have a spouse or you have a partner or you have somebody else who is a parent to your children, even if you're not together, that you spend time with all of your children together, but you also spend time with each of those kids individually. And that's so hard to do sometimes. And it's easy to forget that you need to do that. And it means a lot to them to have that one-on-one time. Just that little one day that you spend with them or afternoon may have a big impact on them in their future. It will be a moment, especially if it doesn't happen very often, that will, you know, have impact. And so I know I'm rambling here, but I think about this stuff a lot, because I find that one of the things that I'm trying to do professionally is expand what I'm doing as a brand, as the C47. I'm trying to expand and move into a place, hopefully, where I can do what I do full-time here, continue to take projects. Of course, I want to do projects for people in our industry and things like that, but I don't want to rely upon those. I want to be able to create content for people who want to learn more about this craft. And I'm kind of in this weird space right now. You know, again, get in on the chat, so this is not just about me, but I'm in this weird space right now where I'm finding that, for instance, with Gearbox, I like shooting episodes where I can cover a subject. But what I'm finding is that with the time that I have and with the audience that I have, that it's hard for me to spend more time doing that, because there's, of course, the conceiving of, the production of, the post-production of, and then the follow-up to that. And then I started to do these live streams in the morning, which does take less of my time, but I don't feel is necessarily giving an audience exactly what I want to give them. And that's the important distinction. It's not that it's not giving an audience something, it's not giving the audience something that I want to give them in terms of content. So I'm very happy with Cameron Flask. I love that we're doing that live stream. I like those creative conversations. I think that they're healthy. I think that it's growing. I think that that makes a lot of sense in terms of its format. I'd like to make it a little more polished in the future. But in terms of Gearbox, my long-term, or really my short-term goal, is to be able to create more in-depth educational content, which is teaching the craft of video production and filmmaking. And I have a lot of things that I'm always interested in learning more about. I'm constantly tinkering. I've got 2 tripods here. My AF is going to wig out. Look, there it is. So right now I have a Miller and I have a Sockler behind me, and I'm doing some tests in terms of rigging up cameras, finding out, you know, what those systems are capable of doing, and then I'm going to, have more information to share with people. But I would like to, I'd like to do more in-depth content, and that means the channel growing. That means being able to spend more time doing those things. So Rimrock Creative Media, by the way, Bad Karma, I think I replied to you. Congratulations as well for your daughter finishing up high school. That's awesome. So one lesson I learned, this is from Rimrock Creative Media, is that it's pretty difficult to turn work travel into vacation and bring family or my wife, because you have to work all day. You're exhausted at the end. I completely agree. In fact, most of the time, I discourage combining those 2 things together. I think that if you're going to go somewhere and you're working a 10 or a 12-hour day, that is not a healthy environment for your family to be when you're trying to work, because at the end of the day, it is exactly like you said, you are exhausted. You might have the energy to go out for a crew dinner and then go back to the hotel room and crash, but that's the time when your family now thinks it's, mom time, dad time, whatever. So the challenge I face is I'm full-time at an agency, full-time often 68 hours per week. This is Wannabe Films. I'm also in the process of releasing and developing entertainment projects. Finding time for family and health is tough. It is unbelievably difficult. And I think that I suffer from something that a lot of creative people do, which is, yes, I have, OCD, and I'm very specific and very organized about certain things. But there's also kind of a chaos to the way I think and the way my space is. And then I have to put organization into it, and then it becomes chaotic again. And I think that that's just who I am as a person. And the older I get, the less I apologize about it. I just figure, hey, this is kind of who I am. And I like the process of just everything just falling apart. And I don't mean professionally. I don't mean in terms of how I deliver, in terms of the product I'm creating. I just mean all the crap that I have around me. I like to just throw up everything and figure stuff out and tinker, and then come back, and I almost enjoy the process of organizing and finding those places for all of those things and the things that are there. The health part of it, we're going to be talking about more on Cameron Flask later today. But it is a very important thing, of course. And again, because of the way I am, and I've just always been this way, I don't sleep a lot. I mean, I pulled in at about 1 o'clock in the morning last night. I woke up when the house was fully asleep at around 6 or so, and that was it. I was up for the day. So, and I've always been that way. And unfortunately, one of the reasons I adjusted how my schedule is because if I go to sleep at 3:30 in the morning, I tend to wake up at 7:30 anyway. And that is not giving my body enough sleep for me to really be able to sustain an energy level that is going to allow me to accomplish what I want to accomplish. And then you just become, sloth-like, a slug-like kind of person. So I think that besides the trip to Italy, which, just going back to that, was really interesting because there's a couple of things that happened on that trip. The first one is I recognized that culturally that country doesn't put the same importance on work as the end all as we do here in the United States and in some other countries around the world. So what I did was I made a decision, and I'm pretty good about this. There are times where I slip because of a project here or there, that essentially I work all day long, and then when dinner happens, that's really when I have family time. Now, that's impossible sometimes, but I really try to do that as best as I can. Unless I'm really pumped about something or I'm really excited about something, then I might work on it. But I try not to make those evening hours as much as possible about that. The other thing which I've mentioned in the past, which may be a good piece of advice, is set the expectation for how you're going to deal with your client at the beginning of your relationship with the client. You don't have to spell it out. It can just be by the way you handle communication. But if you've decided that your workday goes from 8 a.m. until, let's say, 6 p.m. every day, if that's possible, and sometimes I found that it is very possible, it's just how you manage your time during that period if you're self-employed, then don't answer emails for clients in the evening or on weekends, or especially weekends, and they will realize that they're going to get communication from you during certain blocks of time. If you don't set that expectation and you answer emails 24 hours a day when you wake up and look at your phone in the middle of the night or whatever it's going to be, then it's okay. You've given them essentially permission to communicate to you. You can also set precedent. If you don't want to text with somebody, don't ever answer their text. Don't make that part of the communication process. It's something I struggle with all of the time. There are days where everything's fine. And then there are days when I'm getting nonstop emails, nonstop texts, nonstop phone calls, though there's less of that nowadays. And it's just too much for me to handle. And I'm trying to make a deadline. I'm trying to get things organized. It's so dispersing that at this point in time, for me personally, there are emails that I forget to reply to. So if you don't reply to them right away, I mean, at a certain point, they pile up and you forget to do that. I'm going to answer that question, Bill, in a second. So number one was trying to make a decision that I was going to try to consistently have time in the evenings with my family. The second thing that I did was, because I really couldn't pull it off and be effective in terms of what I do for a living, is I decided along with that, that if I had deadlines or I needed that quiet time, that I would just go to bed earlier, and that doesn't always work for everybody, and then I would wake up really early. And I'm an early person, so that works for me. But I would get up, and instead of staying up until 1 or 2 in the morning to make a deadline, I would go to bed at 10, wake up at 4:30, house is completely quiet, and I could get a lot of stuff to, a lot of stuff done. All right, let's see. So Bad Karma got a K2 slider for 89 bucks from Amazon, and now I see it for $199. You got lucky. Travis also limits himself to no more than 3 to 4 consecutive days on set. This means I had to decline my first offer to work on a major feature film I was asked to do. Professionally, it doesn't feel good. Well, Travis, I mean, I think that it's a great thing to bring that up. And you're obviously making that decision because you have an idea of where your work-life balance needs to be. And it shows where your priorities are. Um, they may not be the same priorities as somebody else, but the fact that those are your priorities means that that's going to be something that makes you happy, hopefully, and also creates a potential opportunity for somebody else. So you said that professionally it doesn't feel good, but you obviously made the decision because you think that it's the greatest good overall for your work-life balance. How do I spend my free time? Well, when you have 3 kids, that's pretty easy. But honestly, when it comes to just like having my own space, really the way I like to spend that time is 2 different ways besides hanging out with friends, but the second one is part of that. Number 1 is just taking photographs. So it's just taking my camera out and finding frames and just having my own time. And sometimes that might be just being out with my family and just wandering off for 10 or 15 minutes, not for hours, but just having a little time for myself. And then the second one is cooking. And I've always loved to cook since I was a little kid. So I like that. I don't like to cook for myself, but I like to cook for other people. And I'd say that photography and cooking have a very similar effect on me mentally. When I'm doing both of those things, those activities, and never at the same time, I find that everything else just sort of disappears. So those are my disappear parts. Of course, I love watching movies as well. So that's definitely part of my time. But I don't watch a lot of TV, probably a lot less than some people do. Michael, good morning. So next question, film kit retracted. Uh-oh, I don't see it, so it doesn't matter. What's the best way to get customers or clients? We've talked about that in the past. There's no one way nowadays. I think that you have to latch on to trying to do the type of work that you want to be doing professionally. And that may be collaborating with people who are like-minded. It may be doing it yourself. And then it's just putting your work out there. And part of it is luck, you know. Part of it is just the hustle. And I don't mean that in the bad way. I just mean it's recognizing that things are slower. Like I'm in a period right now where there's work. But I know that if I don't start putting communication out there to the world, there's going to be a rough spot. And it's also that balance of figuring out where that's going to be, especially when you're going to go on a family vacation for 3 weeks. You don't want your planning to be such that you get a huge opportunity when you're supposed to be going away with your family. It's impossible to work all that stuff out, though. Rimrock. Another lesson I learned is not to talk about lenses with my spouse so much. Seriously, it's great when you love reading about filmmaking, even if you're free time, but it's important to unplug. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you've got to do other things. You've got to find other activities. And depending on who your spouse is or your significant other, your partner, or your friends, if they have similar interests, that may just be the perfect thing for you to unwind. Would be just go to a pub, sit down and just chat about kit, gear, all that stuff. Sometimes not. So Travis, correct. I love my work, but not more than my family. I have one shot at the dad thing. Plus, I figure in a few years, she'll be a tween and won't care if I'm around, and I'll take the longer gigs. Travis, I don't know. My kids are amazing, but they go through the alien phase. We all did, I think. And so you're probably right. I would trust your instincts. Do it. And if what you're getting from your family or your personal life is fulfilling, don't ever negate that. I mean, I always say that it's important to remember that I personally feel that money is the byproduct of what we do. We're trying to find something that we do in our work life that we actually enjoy during the day. Most of us don't aspire to be stinking rich and just have gobs of money. We want to be able to have some nice toys that we can, work with, play with, use in terms of our creative juices flowing. And we want to be able to, of course, put food on the table and provide, I think, a good education for kids if you have them. Yeah, Kevin, thank you for coming. I appreciate it. And thank you for watching this and also for watching Camera & Flask. Hopefully you get something out of it. David, greetings. Thanks for stopping by. We are about, I don't know, 2/3 of the way through this conversation, but please continue to ask questions. As always on Gearbox, you can ask general questions about kit. You can ask questions about business, producing, directing. My wheelhouse isn't on, long form narrative, so I just want to put that out there. But when it comes to corporate, when it comes to a little bit of commercial, when it comes to small to no crew production and documentary style, then I'm happy to go for it. Wannabe Films asked, do any of you guys have hobbies? I've never had time for them. I mean, my hobby might be cooking. I don't know about anybody else. I think the good thing about what I do for a living, and possibly many of you, is that I am doing, I mean, I'm looking around at so much gack, it's ridiculous. I am doing something for a living that includes things that would really be my hobby. So sometimes I just love picking up a new camera system and messing around with the camera system, and that could be for a half an hour. And again, I think the whole social media thing is the part of it that just drives me crazy, because I'm so like drawn to this device to see what the new piece of equipment is, or the latest review, what's happening in this crazy country in terms of the news, what's happening around the world. It's just so much overload in terms of information that I think it's the next area that I'm really trying to evaluate. Is there something I'm going to try to do in my life similar to the decision when I came back from Italy 6-7 years ago, that I was going to try to take that evening portion of my life every day and make that about family during the week? Am I going to do something similar when it comes to social media and using devices? Because honestly, I'm horrible at all of the other stuff related to building a brand online. And part of it is that I struggle with it from that work-life balance. It's the, do I want to spend all evening doing that? Part of the reason my wife has now become more part of the company is because we're looking at putting more of that time in during the workday, where she's involved in that. She was a teacher for 22 years, so she's now really a big part of the C47. And I think that that might help, but it's also making decisions about not being on Twitter, not being on Facebook, not being on LinkedIn, not being on YouTube as much, getting the information that I want to get, but then just not wasting time, which is so easy to do. It is so easy to waste time nowadays and not be efficient with your time. And again, when you're a creative person, your mind doesn't necessarily always work that way. It's not, we're not necessarily old spreadsheet type people. We don't think in terms of columns and rows. We're organized, and when we're doing our job, we're there. And I'm very organized when it comes to proposals and budgets and things like that, to create the blueprint of being able to, and allowing me and my team to be creative when we're actually on set. I don't, David, get storyboards from clients very often. That's my answer to that. We've created them for clients, but generally what we'll do now is we'll just do shot lists and outlines for a project. Rimrock says, learn to enjoy the slow times. Don't worry, because you'll long for those days when it gets crazy again. Yeah, the other thing to remember is that if you've been doing this for long enough, somehow it works out. If you're good at what you do and stuff like that. Hey, Tony, I think you sent me an email, and I talked about this briefly at the beginning of the show, but my setup is incredibly straightforward. I basically use a cam link. I shot an episode of Gearbox on it on the channel. I'm using the 4K version now because it supports 24 frames per second. The HD version didn't, and I just have that plugged in via USB to my computer. that's running an HDMI cable to the camera, and then I'm using Google Hangouts. So it is about as simple as it gets. It's all kind of built into the infrastructure, and you just need to have that little CamLink adapter to do at least what I'm doing. And I may do other stuff in the future. I have used Mimo Live from Boinks, which gives you a lot more information. It lets you do a lot more stuff. My hobbies, Harrison says, are my passion project. I try to make a low-budget feature with friends. They take about 2 to 3 years, but always learn something new on every project. That's great. Yeah. It's hard. I mean, when you have that balance, the thing that drives me is actual project-based stuff. So, you know, I really admire people who are creators, who are cranking out content on a regular basis, and they're doing it, they're just doing creative stuff all of the time, and they post creative stuff all of the time. I'm very project driven in terms of what gets me to the point where I'm planning and doing something. And I think that part of that just has to do, again, with the way I look at that work-life balance. And while I could pick up this camera right now after I'm done with this live stream and go shoot 10 different clips of something and do some slow-mo tests, and I can lens whack and all that and put together, you know, a cool little video, that's not who I am as a person. I enjoy watching those things, but that's just not who I am in terms of what I do. You haven't seen any max headroom glitching in the wall? Let me help you. Here you go. Come on, where is it? There you go. Just for you, David. FilmKit says, I find it hard to set boundaries for my clients time-wise and financially, which sometimes leads to doing lots of extra work at no pay or clients calling me at 11 p.m. Difficult learning process. It is a difficult learning process, and very early on, and actually for a very long time, I also had the same problem. And again, it's creating a correct expectation of how you're going to handle communication with your client from the get-go. If you make the mistake, and maybe it's not a mistake for certain people, but for me, it's a mistake. If I make the mistake that my client can get to me any time of the day, and you set that at the beginning of a project, then you've said it's okay. So it's kind of on you in terms of that, you know, and all of us when we make those decisions. And part of that is just how you handle your communication. So I think we can get away without using social media, but we never think it consciously and we let it pass. I agree. I mean, look, the thing is that we don't need it to survive. We like this, I think. This is communication. I still like using a telephone. I like actually speaking to people. I hate the fact that I'm getting, and I use it now as a tool, text all of the time. And I'm using it as a business tool, and it's ridiculous. I mean, there's no paper trail with text. Quote unquote, yes, it's so gray that we actually do business through SMS. How is that possible? An email, okay, there's a paper trail there. Yes, texts are in writing, but they don't necessarily always get saved. And it's a two-way communication that is easily deletable. So Travis is launching a 3-camera video podcast to create something of my own and get back to the fun of creating when a paycheck isn't driving the process. Yeah, Travis, listen, when everything tanked in 2008, I have mentioned this, I made $1,500 in 9 months. I just had my 3rd kid, and I was dying. I mean, it was just credit card survival for the family. And I wasn't doing anything of any significance every day because I wasn't getting work. It wasn't that I didn't want to work. I really wanted to work. So that's when I started the C47. It was sort of the thing that started. And so it started as something for me to do every day. And then I spoke to a camera for 3 months, and then finally people started to show up, and I started to build a little bit of a brand, and that turned into my relationship with Canon, so on and so forth, blah, 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 blah. So do that stuff. If you can do it, go for it. Do I involve my kids sometime with your work? Yes, I do sometimes to help with that life balance. My 4-year-old always wants to help me color correct or try filming something with daddy's camera. You should encourage that, Michael. I think that I went the opposite route in the fact that I want them to reach. They have stuff available to them. But if I reach too far, they just back away. So it's a balance. I mean, I'd be thrilled if one of my kids became a filmmaker. My oldest daughter's going to a theater program next year that she just got accepted to at a university. And she'll learn lots of skills. One of the things that I, tell people is that going into a theater program right now is not a bad career choice. You're learning directing skills, producing skills, set design, scenic design, probably some lighting, sound. There's so many areas besides the performance part of it that are skill sets that can translate to so many other areas that if she decides she wants to be a content creator beyond being a performer in her life, she can do that. So I think that that's interesting. So what's the best way to get clients when just starting out if you only have a narrative reel? Kyle, I don't know the answer to that question. I can only say that you have to first decide for yourself what type of work you want to get. That is the first decision you need to make. What is it that you want to create? That's number one. Once you have an idea of what it is that you want to create, then you have to figure out how you are going to create some of that work. And if that's beyond your narrative reel, then you need to find like-minded people to create some spec work. And this is not spec work for an agency. This is creating the type of work that you want to be creating in your future and designing and creating some spec commercials or whatever it is that you want to do so that you can actually do that. It's also approaching smaller businesses that you're interested in or that you have a connection to. So if you wanted to do more doc style, it might be, I'd love to tell your story and just take on and do a documentary short. This can be a problem sometimes. I mean, I'm in the middle of one that has to do with the local business. And unfortunately, I haven't really been able to sit down and take the whole thing in that I've shot, because I think that I wanted to do it when I moved here as a passion project and then didn't have enough clarity in terms of what the vision of that was. But that's getting picked up again, and we'll get that all sorted out. Where might I find a good template example of a corporate client contract? Well, John, that's I don't really give legal advice. I mean, I did a whole episode on budgets and proposals, and you can take a look at that. And take a. I'm not distributing the template, but I can have you watch that episode, which is one of the Gearbox live streams from a few weeks ago, and hopefully that would give you an idea of where you can start. I either use essentially Pages and Numbers or Word and Excel. And I basically just use those two programs together to create a written proposal along with a spreadsheet for a budget. And that's as far as my spreadsheet skills go. But I can pull those things off. What else do we have here? So I guess the wrap up of this overall, and again, feel free to put some more comments in there, and also let me know what kind of content you want me to be creating. Is for me, I still haven't totally sorted out this whole work-life balance. And as time goes on, especially if you have family, it constantly evolves, because the other people in your lives, family, friends, also have their work-life balance to deal with. And then it's trying to figure out everybody together. And that's the complexity of where we're at as as people. Yeah. So for me personally, I just think it's all about finding that balance. And that sounds trite. That sounds ridiculous. But it is also not easy. There was a max headroom. It's not easy because sometimes what you have to do is you have to evaluate for yourself and everybody else. You also may not be in a position where you are physically in a place where you have a good work-life balance. And that might mean, like for us at a certain point in time, as I turn the phone over, as it starts to glow with some sort of message, we didn't feel that where we were living was necessarily contributing to a quality of life as a family. And that's one of the reasons that we decided to move from the East Coast out to the West Coast here to Oregon. And it made a huge difference. But I do find that, you know, you still carry your baggage with you. And you still are the same personalities overall. You might be in a place that has a different quality of life, but you have to embrace those things in order for them to have an impact on you. And change of environment can be a huge contributing factor to changing your outlook in terms of how things are, short term or long term in terms of your change of environment. Again, 6-7 years ago, that one silly trip to Italy totally changed my viewpoint on work-life balance. And I realized that the way I was managing my time, and it wasn't very structured, but the way I was managing my time was completely inefficient, because as soon as I got back and I changed the viewpoint from working all day long and then having dinner and then continuing to work into the evening, into late at night, to I'm going to just stop working at the end of, you know, the work day and then have my evenings with my family and my friends, I didn't get less work, and I didn't get less work done. Part of that was a two-parter. Number one was I made the decision, so I think my time management was much better during the daytime hours. And number two was experience. I knew how much effort and time it would actually take to get a result or a product. And so if I was more efficient with it and I just knew, okay, I'm going to spend the time to do this, it made a huge difference. And again, I didn't get less work. I didn't make necessarily less money, but I'm self-employed, so that's a roller coaster all the time. And it made me realize that that decision wasn't a decision to do less. It wasn't a decision to make less money or to get less work. It was a decision to put something in that was going to give me a much better work-life balance. And in actual fact, it was a win-win all around. Thanks, David, about enjoying my product videos. Should you consider a retainer pricing model for corporate events and talking head vids? Daniel, maybe. Retainer work is great if you've got a nice relationship with a client and you can set up something where they need consistent work done. Every single time you take a retainer job, the first thing that you should think about is this is not going to last forever, because it never does. So take it for when you have it, and then understand that you can't rely upon it. And it could go away. I mean, I had a project actually with an existing client that we were speccing out at the end of last year, and we were going to be doing 150 post-production videos for them. And in the end, that actually turned out to be, when we actually did all the stuff and the business and everything, 35. Big difference. We're on another project for them right now, but always take it with a grain of salt. Please always take it with a grain of salt. After several months of slow going with freelance, I've suddenly found myself busy. Getting back into the mindset of I have to work has been a challenge. Like, oh yeah, deadlines. Yeah, this is it. If you're in this world, freelance, self-employed, it is a roller coaster ride, my friends, and you are on that roller coaster for the duration, unless you decide to go in-house or take, you know, a 9-to-5er, which are never 9-to-5ers. And again, if you're going to do that, set the right expectation. Big mistake a lot of people make when they go in-house is they say, yeah, I can do all of that stuff. And then you become the resource for everything and you have no life. And then you've lost your work-life balance. When you're working for a company, hopefully you have a work-life balance and you're getting benefits and you have some extra time with your family and you can shut off at certain times and things like that. So I don't know how we got to 50 minutes on this thing, but hopefully there's some advice in there, some conversation that's worthwhile. For anybody who's new to the channel, please subscribe. The bigger this channel gets, I promise you, the more time I can spend creating in-depth content for you having to do with what we all love to do. So if you know anybody who would be interested in, oh my goodness. If you know anybody who would be interested in this channel, recommend it. We've got Cameron Flask coming up this afternoon at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern. That is British summer time, 11 o'clock. And then over in the Czech Republic where Ben Barden is, it is midnight. So quick question. Have you tried the Elgato Stream Deck? No. And I don't know if it's going to actually work for what I want to do. I think it requires a different software solution. It may be in the future with some of the things I'm thinking about doing. Thanks for everything you do. Thank you, Kyle, for watching. Thanks for spending your Wednesday mornings with us. Travis, absolutely. It's a pleasure. Let's get the quantity of people up here. Please go to the website and give me recommendations of content you'd like to see. And you call it Yum Yum Drink Time. Yeah, that's Cameron Flask, David. If I don't answer your email, it's not because I didn't want to. It's because I probably forgot because I get so many emails. And that's not just through the channel, but that's just in work and life and everything else. So I do apologize if I do not. And if I don't answer, just email me again. Thank you again for watching again this afternoon. Travis is going to name his podcast Mike and Mug, make it audio centric. That's kind of cool, actually. Thanks again for watching. Subscribe, check things out, and I'll see you guys next time on Gearbox.